السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we're going to be continuing with the life of Abubakr As-Siddiq radiallahu anh. The last lesson we spoke about those who left Islam after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we mentioned how they left for different reasons. Some of them left because they felt like Islam was going to go downwards after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them refused to give zakah anymore now that the Prophet ﷺ had passed away. Some of them were following, for example, their old traditions again from Jahiliyyah. Some of them would have from their own tribes people who claimed to be prophets themselves, and so they would end up following those prophets, fake prophets and messengers. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, as we mentioned, set out to combat all of these different groups, and they weren't really together because you had certain groups that were following other fake prophets and messengers. You had other people who were leaving Islam for other reasons. So he had to send people out to fight against all of these different groups, these different tribes who had now apostated and left Islam. And you can imagine the immense pressure on Abu Bakr As-Siddiq radiallahu anh, from the unity and from the peace and tranquility of the Muslims living together, and of course they had their trials and tribulations, but now it seems like the Muslim Ummah was almost falling apart because people are leaving Islam and tribes were leaving Islam. So it's said that somebody once mentioned to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, they said that had this issue, this Khilafah that you were given, this responsibility, had it descended upon mountains, it would have crushed those mountains. The immense amount of pressure you were on. And yet they would say, we don't see you weak. We don't see you become weak or become under pressure. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said something interesting. He said, terror has not entered my heart ever since the night of the cave. Meaning when he was in the cave with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said to him, don't worry, we'll be safe. Inna Allah ma'ana, Allah is with us. He said, ever since that time, I haven't felt that fear and that terror in my heart. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, what does he do? He assigns specific companions, generals from the army, to go and deal with each tribe and each group of people who have left Islam. And so, for example, he would send Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh to go to the Banu Asad tribe. And then he would say, after you go and you're finished with Banu Asad tribe, then go to the Tamim tribe. Then go to Yamama, where Musaylama was, the one who claimed to be a messenger, amongst other people that we'll mention inshallah. Ikrimah, the son of Abu Jahl, who was a great companion and general, he would tell him to go straight to Musaylama. And he had like 11, there's a list of 11 companions here, 11 people from the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, who Abu Bakr radiallahu anh told to go here to tackle and confront and face this tribe and these people and those people. And then he would give further instructions, and he would tell them, once you're done with them, go to this place or go to that place or help reinforce this army that's in this direction, etc. So you're talking like 1400 years ago, where of course there's no emails, no phones, there's no messages, and he has to send messengers back and forth to 10, 11, 12 different generals with their own small contingent of soldiers, telling them what to do, where to go, what's happening, are you done, what stage are you in terms of facing the enemy, etc. So it really shows us the efficiency and the organizational skills of Abu Bakr As-Siddiq radiallahu anh. He would know exactly where each army was, what each army was doing, what each army was supposed to do on the following day. And it's like 10, 11 different groups of soldiers in different places. So you can imagine nowadays people would have maps and they would pinpoint exactly where people are, or maybe nowadays would be Google Maps or something. And even in the olden days they would have maps. We don't even know if Abu Bakr radiallahu anh had a map because they're still expanding. Yet in his mind he knew this person is here, this person is there, they're going here. And so he would arrange his soldiers, and of course the people were proficient people because they were companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They had trained under the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, if he was the chief in command, then you had his overall commander of the actual army itself, who would be Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh. So Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh was of course a brilliant military strategist. He was a great soldier, a great general. We saw this at the Battle of Uhud, when he defeated the enemy by going around the mountain and attacking from behind, and of course with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in the subsequent battles after the Battle of the Trench, when he became a Muslim after the conquest of or before the conquest of Mecca. So you have these examples of these companions who were supporting Abu Bakr radiallahu an, who were following the commands and orders of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an. From those who left Islam and claimed to be a messenger was somebody by the name of Al-Aswad Al-Ansi. Al-Aswad Al-Ansi. And he was known to have a big physique. He was large, he was somebody who was strong, and he was known for his bravery. He was also somebody who used sorcery and magic. He was very eloquent in his speech also. And he would give himself a title. He would call himself the Merciful One of Yemen. Musaylama, he would call himself the Merciful One of Yamama. And so he was copying Musaylama, the Merciful One of Yemen. And he would say, 2 angels came to me, Sahiq and Shaqiq, and they gave me revelation. So of course these people are just making stories up, trying to emulate the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and of course they've left Islam as a result of this. And the first people to follow him were the people from his own tribe, because of course the tribal mentality was that we have to support our own tribal member, and so they would follow him. And this in fact happened in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this person left Islam, as well as Musaylama. They left Islam in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and we'll talk about Musaylama later on. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he would basically send out contingents to try to face these people who had left Islam. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he eventually sent out a contingent to try to assassinate Al-Aswad Al-Ansi. And the intention was that if they kill Al-Aswad Al-Ansi directly instead of a battle, many of the people would end up abandoning obviously his ideas, because he's now dead. Because his dream, his vision was of victory. He would tell people, we're going to be victorious, we're going to win. So if he's killed, if he's assassinated, then of course there is no victory anymore, and the people will realize that he was a fake prophet and messenger. And there's a story of him killing a man, one of the leaders of a tribe, and then forcefully marrying himself to that person's wife. So she was a widow, her husband's killed by Aswad, and then he marries her, and she had a hatred for Al-Aswad. And it said that she contacted the Muslims and told them that I'll give you direct access to the bedroom where Aswad is going to be sleeping. And so she told the Muslims infiltrated the house and they killed Aswad Al-Ansi. And just as was predicted, those who followed Al-Aswad Al-Ansi, they ended up leaving, obviously his ideas and the belief of him being a prophet and messenger, because he's now dead. He's not, obviously wasn't a prophet or a messenger, because his plans of victory and conquering lands and power and strength, of course, wasn't fulfilled. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was very merciful and lenient. When the people came back and they returned back to Islam, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he would forgive them, overlook their faults. Of course, there's a punishment for apostasy in Islam, but Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he would overlook the mistakes. He had this leniency towards them. He would have rahmah over them. And you had other people. There was a man by the name of Tulayha al-Asadi. Again, he claimed to be a prophet. It said that once his people ran out of water and he gave a riddle to them. And if you know the answer to the riddle, then you'll find water. And so they were confused. They thought, okay, let's try to figure this riddle out. And when they followed the instructions in the riddle, they were surprised to find that they came to water. And so they started to follow this man. They thought he was a prophet. And so they would start to follow Tulayha al-Asadi. Eventually Abu Bakr radiallahu anh commanded Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh to go out and fight Tulayha al-Asadi. And eventually Tulayha al-Asadi is also killed. Khalid bin Walid, of course, is a great companion of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet spoke about him and said, he is a sword from the swords of Allah. And Allah unsheathed him against the disbelievers and against the hypocrites. So it's almost as if Khalid's whole purpose in life was to fight against those who disbelieved and to fight against those who apostated, and the munafiqeen and the hypocrites and disbelievers in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh. And Again, Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh, he's victorious when it came to Tulayha al-Asadi also. And there's so many examples we can give of battles and skirmishes and events where Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh, Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, the other companion, were victorious in terms of their battles, in terms of defeating those who left Islam. And then of course we come to Musaylim al-Kadhab, Musaylim the liar. And he was the greatest threat to the Muslims because his tribe was a large tribe and it was known for warfare and for battle. And Musaylim al-Kadhab, of course, he would claim he was a prophet and messenger, as we may or may not know. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu an, one of the companions, he met Musaylim. And Musaylim asked him, he said, what has been given to your prophet, meaning the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said he's been given wal asr, Surah Asr, wal asr inna al-insan lafi khusr. Musaylama says, I have been given a chapter similar to it, and starts reciting a random chapter. And Amr ibn al-As radiallahu an, he hears it and he says, by Allah, you know that I know that you're a liar. Like, I don't even have to say you're a liar. You know what I'm thinking because of the things you're saying. And he would have his own, he would say, for example, Surah Fil, Muslims would say Surah Fil has been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Musaylimah would say a surah similar has been given to me, and he would recite his own Surah Fil, and he would say, it's recorded in history, he would say Al-Fil, Mal-Fil, wa ma adraka Mal-Fil. The elephant. What is the elephant? What makes you think you know what the elephant is? Lahu dhanabun wabil. He has a small tail. وَلَهُ خُرْطُومٌ طَوِيلٌ. He has a long trunk. And that was his surah. That was his surah Fil. So, even hearing these, it's laughable how, these people would conjure up and make up their own surahs, and people knew. That's the crazy thing. Their own followers would know that he's just making this stuff up. So why would they follow him? Because he's a tribal member. And they felt like they need to just support him because, he's saying he's a messenger, so we have to follow him. Musaylimah sent a letter to the Prophet ﷺ, and he would write and he would say to Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, from Musaylimah, the messenger of Allah. He would say, verily Allah has split the earth into two, half for you and half for me. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he sent a letter back, and he said from Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, to Musaylimah al-Kadhab, to Musaylimah the liar. He said, verily, إِنَّ الْأَرْضَ لِلَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. The earth belongs to Allah, He gives it to whomsoever He wants. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's not anybody's. Allah gives it to whomsoever He wants. And so, of course, he responded back to Musaylimah al-Kadhab. And then he asked the two messengers who had come, and he said, do you believe, what this man is saying? And they said, yes, we believe what he says. And he said, had it not been for the fact that the messengers of people, when they are sent, are not killed, I would have executed and killed both of you right now. Because of the stupidity and because of the fact that you've left Islam. This is something which is it's a serious thing. And so Musaylimah al-Kadhab, of course, he had his army, he had his tribe. In the time of Abubakr radiallahu anh, after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Musaylimah, of course, he's even more hopeful now, or optimistic of trying to have some kind of power and position. And he feels that there's a void that needs to be filled. So Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh is commanded by Abu Bakr radiallahu anh to make his way to Yamama to fight Musaylimah al-Kadhab. And Musaylimah camps in a place called Aqriba. And Khalid ibn Walid, he meets up with Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl. So Ikrimah also, he's met up with Khalid ibn Walid. They both have their armies, and they participate in a battle against Musaylimah al-Kadhab. And Wahshi is in the battle. Wahshi, of course, is the one who killed Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, at the Battle of Uhud. Wahshi, of course, became a Muslim. He's there and he sees Musaylimah. And he takes his spear and he throws it, and it pierces right through Musaylimah's body. The whole spear goes through his body. So you can imagine, like obviously he was an expert when it came to the spear. And another companion by the name of Abu Dujana, who was also at the Battle of Uhud and the Battle of Badr, I think the Battle of Badr also, he runs towards Musaylimah as soon as he's struck with the spear, and he strikes him with his sword, and Musaylimah falls to the ground and he's killed. And so Wahshi, subhanAllah, it's almost like Wahshi, he's involved in killing Musaylama. It's almost like he redeems himself for what he did when he came to killing Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu an at the Battle of Uhud all those years ago. And so with that, Musaylama, his era is now over. He's also been defeated, and there's lots of examples of these sort of skirmishes and battles that are taking place. And all of this, by the way, is happening in 2 years of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's life. He's the Khalifa for 2 years. And there was so much that was happening, but he manages to contain and hold on to the Muslim Ummah, and the Muslim Ummah are remaining united after the death of Abubakr As-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Also, there was other people who had left Islam. They were following other individuals. One of them was somebody by the name of Muja'a, who was following somebody who claimed to be a prophet. And Muja'a is captured by Khalid al-Walid. And so Khalid al-Walid says to him, in order for us to have peace now, because Muja'a realizes, okay, fine, I made a mistake, etc. He says, marry your daughter off to me as a sign that you are now with the Muslims. And of course, marriage is done for many reasons, political reasons, something which is done in the past. And then Muja'a himself says, I'm worried that if I marry my daughter off to you, I will receive the wrath of Abubakr As-Siddiq. Meaning he won't be happy if this happens. Khalid ibn Walid says, no, there's nothing wrong with this. Marry her off to me. And so he marries her off, and a message is sent by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu after this, telling telling Khalid ibn Walid to kill those who were captured, the ones who had left Islam, Muja'a and the others. But it's after he marries his daughter and after the peace treaty is made. And so news comes back to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that he's basically married his daughter. So you can imagine from should leave it here. You can imagine from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's point of view as the leader, it's almost like he's done the opposite of what I asked. But of course, it's after Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu has married the daughter of Muja'a. And so he writes a letter to Khalid ibn Walid and says, are you so free to go about marrying women when in the courtyard of your own house the blood of 1,200 Muslims has not yet dried? Because of the battles that took place, the apostates, those who left Islam, the murtads fighting the Muslims, etc. And he's basically angry, like, what are you doing? That wasn't what I wanted you to do. And so Khalid ibn Walid responds and sends a letter back, and he explains that it was only after we had been given complete victory that I made these pacts and these deals, these treaties. It wasn't, to reconcile. It wasn't because we were being defeated. I knew that we were going to be, the ones in power, the ones who were going to have the upper hand. And also he said, I've become basically an in-law of this tribe that had left Islam. And now they're back in the fold, so we're closer now. Meaning there's closeness now, and hopefully this will be a means by which, inshallah, they won't leave Islam again. And he said it wasn't a hard thing to marry the daughter of Muja'a, meaning like I wasn't going out of my way and attempt after attempt after attempt, or forcing anybody to marry me. It was something that was done very easily, very simply. A conversation ensued, and we got married. It didn't violate the laws of Islam. It was done according to the Islamic, the Islamic etiquette and the Sharia of Islam. And also, he was saying that just because Muslims have been killed, it wouldn't make sense that I would avoid marriage on the basis of the deaths of many Muslims. Meaning, yes, what happened was bad, but it doesn't mean that now marriage is something which I shouldn't do. I mean, those two things are not, connected. They're exclusive, separate kind of incidents. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu hears the letter that was sent by Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, and he realizes some of the companions also, they speak about Khalid ibn Walid, praising him and praising his efforts, and they say, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, or Khalifa of the Messenger of Allah, they would say, Khalid ibn Walid, when he's in battle, he makes the attempt to fight, to the death. He's not somebody who's afraid. He's not somebody who's worried about alliances and trying to make peace treaties. It's not something that's in his nature. Meaning he's not abandoning his deen. There's no sense of fear or weakness in his faith. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's reaction to the letter, to the comments of the companions, puts the matter to rest, and he realizes, okay, whatever he did, it's fine. And so the day of Yamama, which is of course the great battle in which Musaylim al-Kadhab was killed, Khalid ibn Walid plays a prominent role. And there's so many stories we can mention about Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh. He himself describes an incident in the Battle of Yamama. He says that I was in the garden of death. There was a garden in Yamama where there was severe fighting taking place. And many disbelievers were killed in that specific incident. He says, I was in the garden when one of their men grabbed onto me. So they were on their horses. And he says, one of them grabbed onto me while we were on our horses. And when he grabbed onto me, we both fell off our horses and we fell to the ground. And he said, I took my dagger, which was attached to my sword, and I stabbed him with my dagger. And he stabbed me with a dagger that was connected to his sword. And he repeatedly started to stab me several times. He said I had 7 stab wounds. So this is like he's talking about an incident that happened. So I had 7 stab wounds. And he said, but I continued to push down with my dagger until I found his body losing its grip. The body started to relax, meaning he was now dead. And he said, I couldn't move because of my wounds, and blood was pouring out of my body. And he said, nonetheless, he died, and I remained alive, and I thank Allah for this. So this is just one, example. I mean, even you think about what we watch nowadays in films and TV shows, and battles and these kinds of things. He's stabbed 7 times. They say that when Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu died, there wasn't, a place you could put your hand on his body except that there was some kind of wound from battle. And amazingly, he doesn't die in battle. He was sick and he dies on his deathbed from a natural illness. Of course, Musaylama, he would have these stories. The conflict was over now. People came back to Islam. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he would say, what kinds of things would he say? Like, tell me what this man would say, Musaylama. What kinds of things would he say? The Banu Hanifa tribe, they repented, they came back to Islam. And they said, will you not excuse us from having to say anything? Like, we don't want to mention the surahs that he used to say. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is saying, no, you have to do it. I want to hear. Like, what kinds of surahs would he have? What kind of surahs would he have? And they said he would have a surah called the frog. Difda. In Arabic it's called Difda. Ya Difda, bintu Difda'in. O frog, daughter of 2 frogs. Neither water do you spoil, nor a drinker do you prevent from drinking. Your head is in water and your tail is in mud. This is his amazing, revelation from Allah. These are his amazing surahs. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, of course, when he would hear these stories, just like we are now, he was amazed. Like, how could you even accept his idea of being a prophet? It said that Musaylama, once he spit into a well, so the well could be full of water and barakah and blessing, but they said the well dried. There was even less water. The well completely dried, in fact, after he spat into the well. We know the Prophet ﷺ, water would come out of wells and out of vessels when he would put his blessed hands in them. It said that once he did wudu with water and he poured it into a date palm tree, the root of a date palm tree, and the water became dry. The tree itself became dry. It dried out. The tree died, basically. It said that once a group of children came to him for him to bless, and after he blessed them, they developed either a lisp where they couldn't speak, or some of the children actually lost their hair. So, of course, this is a adhab and punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One man came, his eyes were irritated. And so he wiped his eyes. What do you think happened? He became blind. So the opposite effect. And of course, all of this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing people this is the adhab of Allah. There's no barakah and blessing when you commit acts of kufr and disbelief. From the things which Abu Bakr As-Siddiq radiallahu anh did is, of course, one of the most important acts and events in his lifetime, other than, of course, quelling all of these rebellions and people fighting against the Muslims from the non-Muslims, to those who left Islam, to those who refused to give zakat, to those who followed other prophets and messengers, etc. There was something else which is very significant. Anyone know what this was? The compilation of the Quran. The compilation of the Quran. Many people had memorized the Quran. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an came to Abubakr As-Siddiq radiallahu an, and he was very concerned. He said that many people have died in these battles, Yamama, other battles, and many of those people were Huffaz of the Quran. They had memorized the whole Quran. There's no actual copy of the Quran in the time of Abubakr As-Siddiq. There's no written copy. It's in the hearts and the minds of the believers. It's an old tradition. Even today, people memorize the Quran. This is the tradition. The Quran is an aid for a person to help him read or memorize Quran. So he said, we need to compile the Quran into a book form. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, straight away he says, how can I do something that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never did? Straight away, this is the first thing he says. I can't do this. This wasn't done by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Umar ibn Khattab eventually persuades Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, this is a good thing. This is something good, it's beneficial. Nothing wrong with this. And of course, there are examples in the Quran of the Quran being described as a book. Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitabu la rayba fi. This is the book in which there is no doubt. So, nothing wrong with this Quran being compiled. And so, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is persuaded. Umar ibn Khattab then says, let's appoint someone to do this job for us. And they invite Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anh. Zayd ibn Thabit was an Ansari from Medina, and he was a very intelligent child. He had memorized surahs of the Quran even before the Prophet ﷺ had made the hijrah to Medina. Don't forget, there's no mushafs. So the only way you can learn Quran is by other people teaching you. And if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ isn't there, and you're a child of 8, 9, 10 years old, you don't have a madrasa, there's no teachers. It's just hearing people recite in Medina and then learning from maybe those who were sent by the Prophet ﷺ. And so he starts picking up surahs and he ends up learning a huge amount. And they even present him to the Prophet ﷺ when he comes for after the hijrah, and he's reciting surahs to the Prophet ﷺ. And there are Jews living in Medina, of course, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ wants to converse with them. So he tells Zayd radiallahu anh to learn the Hebrew language. Zayd radiallahu anh learns the Hebrew language in 10 days. A language in 10 days. Picks up the language and learns it in 10 days. And he's able to read their scriptures now. So again, it shows you his ability. By the time the Prophet ﷺ had passed away, he had memorized the whole Quran. In fact, he was an expert in the Quran. On top of this, he was the one who would sometimes write down the Quran when it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. Like live, when it was being revealed by Jibreel, he was writing it down as the Prophet's reciting it. So he is basically the perfect person. He's younger in age, so he has more vitality, more energy to be able to complete this task, in a better manner. So they tell Zayd ibn Thabit, this is what we're going to do. He says, we can't do this. Same thing. How can we do something which the Prophet ﷺ never did? So you can see they're all on the same state, in the same kind of mindset. Eventually, he's persuaded, and he says, radiallahu anh, I searched out for the various parts of the Quran. Some were on palm branches, flat stones, in the hearts of men, and I found all the parts that people had been writing on, because they were all commanded to come and bring anything you have that the Quran was written on, bring it so we can compile the Quran. And the gathered scrolls that were eventually compiled and written by Zayd ibn Thabit, he would always have two people who had come to basically recite the ayah themselves. So to make sure that this ayah is an actual ayah in the Quran, in the surah, he would have two witnesses who had heard it from the Prophet ﷺ, and they would recite the ayah to him, and then he would write it down. And he would do that for every single ayah, 6,000 ayat. So you can see this was a huge monumental task. So he gathers it all. The first mushaf, the first Quran, written Quran, took up the space of a whole room. It was sheets and then a huge sheet piled on top. It wasn't like a book that we see nowadays. There weren't really books in those days like we have today. And it filled up a whole room. Because the purpose wasn't for you to sit down and read the Quran from the book itself. The purpose was for preservation, to preserve the Quran. That was the whole intent. If there's an issue with people with regards to what the ayah says or how it should be recited, they can refer back to it in cases of emergencies. But otherwise, it was for preservation. And then eventually Abubakr radiallahu anhu, when he passed away, it was given to Umar ibn Khattab, and it was in his possession. And then it was in the possession of Hafsa bint Umar radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the daughter of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. And Ali radiallahu anhu, when he was the leader, or before him Uthman radiallahu anhu, he took it and he made copies and he sent it to the different parts of the Muslim world. And of course, Zayd ibn Thabit, as we mentioned, was the ideal person. He was 21 years old when he started this task. He was intelligent, he was very wise, he had an excellent memory, he had memorized the whole Quran, he knew the Quran back to front. He was, of course, a trustworthy individual, and he had many experiences in this field, and so he was an ideal person. And of course, if it wasn't for Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, we wouldn't have the Quran, the Mus'haf, compiled as it is today. And this is from the achievements and accomplishments of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Of course, his original copy didn't last. It's not around anymore because paper and material doesn't last for that long. But Uthman ibn Affan, he made the copies from that original Mus'haf, and some of Uthman's copies and some of those transcripts are still around in some form or another in museums here and there. But again, this is another accomplishment of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And inshallah, we'll conclude here. In the next lesson, we'll speak about some of the other conquests of Abu Bakr Siddiq. So not only did he compile the Quran, not only did he quell the rebellions that took place of people leaving Islam, but he actually conquered huge parts of the Persian and Roman Empire in 2 years. And this is from the achievements of Abu Bakr Siddiq, from the achievements of Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, as we'll see next time. And we'll also inshallah speak about his ultimate demise and his death, and him appointing Umar ibn Khattab as the leader of the Muslims, inshallah. And with that, inshallah, we'll be concluding. Any questions before we finish? Any questions? جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.